Hi, I'm Julia and welcome back to my booktube channel NB Library. And this is going to be my January 2026 reading wrap up. I almost said 2025 there, still not quite used to that one. I made a lot of videos this month. I documented a lot of the books that I read, so some of the books that I've already have in-depth reviews for, I'm just gonna give you kind of a star rating and quick thoughts and then skip over, and then I'll spend more time talking about the ones that were not already featured in a video. And then some of them are also in upcoming videos, so I don't want to spoil my thoughts there too much. The first book that I read in January, in fact, the first book of the year, was Kiki, Kallira Breaks a Kingdom by Sangu Mandana. This is one of my 26 books to read in 2026. I haven't made a video on that yet. I have been making a lot of videos lately. You'll hear about that more at some point. Have I read any other books on my list of books to read in 2026? No, not yet. So started the year off strong, working on that goal, and then haven't worked on it since. But this was Sangu Mandana's middle grade, or her debut middle grade, that is. One of my favorite books of 2025 was Vanya and the Shifting Spire, and so I really wanted to read more of this author's middle grade. And I did like this. I think that it was a little too simple for my taste, but again, I'm not a middle grade reader. I just enjoy reading it as an adult. But there were some really lovely moments and descriptions in this. Oh, I forgot to mention what this is about. So, the main character, Kiki, is obsessed with drawing all of these characters and locations from this tale from her grandparents' region of India, and it turns out that her drawings have come to life, and the people that she's been drawing in this force of fighting kids are real, and they come out of her drawings to bring her into their world because the villain of the story is terrorizing them, and they think that she's the only one who can stop it. And so she herself is a little bit of a coward, a little bit of a scaredy cat, and suffers from anxiety and maybe some OCD tendencies. And so she's not having a great time caught up in this world, but she does want to help these friends that she literally made. And so she is spending time in this little pocket dimension trying to help these kids. I don't know that I'll be reading the second book, but I am still really looking forward to the next Vanya book, and I rated this 3.75 stars. The next book that I read in January was Starcrossed by Ali Theron. This is the second book in the Magic in Manhattan series. I read the first one back in the end of December. This is a Achillean historical romance set in the 1920s where there are some people that have magic, and the characters that we are following, one of them has magic and one does not. The plot of this one is blending a little bit together with the other books in my mind, but I did rate this one 4 stars. It's just some good fun. I was gonna say good clean fun, but it's not clean. There are sex scenes in it. Just like really well executed, well written. Have I thought about them much since I've read them? No, but very enjoyable to listen to. I listened to this on audio. Disrupted the pile. Next was Ocean's Godori by Elaine Yu Cho. I read this for the female r/female gaze SFF Fall and Winter Reading Challenge. Maybe workshop the title of that one, guys. I read this for the East Asian Author Square, and I got this from a local bookstore. This one is kind of funny because it is a duology, and there are kind of 3 main characters. One of them is Ocean, one is a character called Teo, who's a friend of hers, and then, who's the third guy? See, I don't even remember him. Haven. So, one of my main complaints with this was that there's a romance developing between Haven and Ocean. They're 2 of the 3 main characters, but the whole plot and conflict has to do with Teo's family. Teo is a member of this very, very wealthy and influential family. We're in a solar system in the future that is kind of dominated by Korean culture, and the kind of like space force is based in Korea, so a lot of Korean pilots and astronauts are flying out there in the solar system. And I just read Charlie Jane Anders talking about how like Becky Chambers this is, and it is, but I just think there were too many elements that didn't come together, and it's supposed to be Ocean's book, but her story really gets overshadowed by Teo's, I think. And I liked the world building details, but yeah, this one just didn't quite come together for me. And I thought that I was gonna read the sequel, but now I just don't think that I will. And I rated this one 3.25 stars. The next book that I read was To the Moon and Back by Eve Noble. I have a lot to say about this book, but I'm not actually going to say it because I don't want to be punching down on this author. I don't want to go on a big long rant because I'm really rooting for this author. I was really rooting for this book. This is a sapphic historical romance by a Black author, and the premise is so delicious. And if there had just been a few more editing passes, I think the author would have really pulled it off. But there were so many spelling and continuity errors that I remember like putting my e-reader down and screaming at my roommate about it. But the premise is that we've got our two main POV characters who are love interests. One is a Black female calculator for NASA. She is at Langley, where Hidden Figures is set. It's hard to tell that it's set in Virginia because it's not actually stated until like 3/4 of the way through, so I wasn't quite sure where it was set. And one of the continuity errors is that it mentions them being in Houston, which would make sense. There's a space center there. But that was apparently an error because it actually is set in Virginia at Langley. But then her love interest is a Russian defector who is a doctor and mathematician, came over from Russia. Her mother is still back there, and they are holding her mother's ability to come to America over her head, and they make her spy on this woman that she's falling in love with because she is part of Black Panthers. It's such a good scenario, and the author like really uses the angst potential, but the continuity errors and some spelling errors just really dragged this down for me. If I had just if there just, again, been a few more editing passes, a few beta readers who really put in the time, this could have been excellent. And I really hope that this is a series, I hope the next book in this series has a little bit more care taken with the editing so that I can really hype this author and series. I don't know that I would recommend reading this because the reading experience was so frustrating, but there is a really good story and relationship in there. It's just not quite ready to be read yet. Like, okay, so one detail that I love is that the main character likes Star Trek, and she really looks up to Lieutenant Uhura, of course. But the first time that Uhura is mentioned, it clearly auto-corrected because it says Lieutenant Hurrah. That is so easy to catch. Just please go over the book again before you hit publish. All right, that's all I'm gonna say. I could go on for so much longer, but I'm not going to. Next was the third Magic in Manhattan book, Wonderstruck by Ali Theron. This was another 4-star. Just a good time was had by all. They do some globe hopping, and we introduce characters who are gonna be, well, that have already been in a sequel trilogy, which I will be reading, and I'm looking forward to getting to it. Oh my god, I just saw the next book. I'm so excited. Okay, so I'll have a video coming out later in February where I talk about being a NetGalley reviewer, getting arcs and reviewing them. What is my hair doing? I just got out of the shower. It was surprisingly easy to sign up for NetGalley, and I have been getting approved a lot, which is so amazing, and I'm so grateful. But the first arc that I got was a 5-star, and it is The Johnson 4 by Christina Hammonds Reed. Buckle in because I'm not going to shut up about this book for the rest of the year. Also, happy recent book birthday to this book. It was released on February 3rd. I really do recommend that you purchase this book. And I know a lot of book reviewers and ARC reviewers like really overhype books, and trust me, I'm not gonna do that. I really state how I feel about books. I'm not even joking when I say I hope this is a modern classic and it is talked about and loved for years and years to come. This book was absolutely incredible. It made me cry multiple times at work. But what is this book about, Julia, you might ask? So it took me an embarrassing long time to realize that parts of this book were based on the Jackson 5. It is called the Johnson 4. I told my mom and my sister that, and they started laughing at me, deservedly. So this is about a boy band of 3 brothers from a black family. It starts in 1968. Their dad is trying to have them become like Motown famous, but they're driving back from a competition one day, or maybe an audition, and they stop by the side of the road to, you know, go pee, and they come across the ghost of a little boy who was killed in the 30s. He was lynched, and he was a vaudeville performer, and so he's a singer, and he wants a family so badly. You know, he had a really rough life. He never had a like family he could really call his own, and so reluctantly the dad Odysseus agrees to bring this boy Christmas home, and that sets off this chain of events. But it's about being black in the 60s through the 90s when this book is set. It's about fame and the toll that takes on you. It's about family and life and relationships between people, between loved ones and brothers. It's about growing apart from people and coming back again. It was just so masterfully done. There were so many parts that I just wanted to highlight. I was reading this on the NetGalley reader because I couldn't get it on my Kobo, and I was so mad that I couldn't highlight things on that reader because there were so many just beautiful passages that made me just like stare at the wall. And I think this book really hit for me in a way that it wouldn't have a few years ago if I hadn't gone through some things and gotten some more miles on my soul, as they say. But really like appreciating this with an adult's eyes and seeing just all the things that this family goes through, but then like all of the good and bad things that come their way. There's a character that's in this for like 2.5 chapters who passes away in a really tragic circumstance, and she was in the book for such a short amount of time, and when she died I cried. I cried at the end of the book. I'm crying now just like talking about it. It was just phenomenal. It's currently my favorite book of the year. I'm gonna have to read something really, really good to knock it off that top spot. Oh, I should mention and thank Valentine for the advanced reader copy. So glad that I got this. Just a great first arc to get, and I really, really recommend it. Next was another arc. This was actually an advanced listener copy from Macmillan. So thank you to Macmillan Audio, and this was Nobody's Baby by Olivia Waite, the sequel to Murder by Memory, of course. The Art Deco, Agatha Christie, Becky Chambers mashup. This is set on a spaceship where all of the inhabitants are the original people that set out 300 to 500 years ago, and they have this technology where they can keep being reborn. Once they age, they are then kind of regrown at age 20 and then go throughout their lives just over and over again until they ultimately get to their destination of the planet that they're going to live on. And Dorothy Gentleman, the main character, is one of the ship's detectives, so she's solving various crimes and mysteries and capers throughout the ship, and she has a hapless nephew who is one of the programmers of the ship's AI. And in this book, they find a random baby, and because the population is the same that it's been throughout the years, this should be impossible. People have had their hormones turned off, you're not able to create a baby, and so it's figuring out where this baby came from and why they were dropped off on Dorothy's nephew's doorstep. I rated this one 3.75 stars. It was an enjoyable time, but I think that this and I had this problem with Murder by Memory too, it's just too short. I don't think it's enough time to really like soak in the clues and get introduced to the people and figure out what happened. I just think that it needs more time to cook. Like, I love a novella, but sometimes novella is not the right medium for the story you're trying to tell. As with Murder by Memory, I love the details. I think the world building is so good and so cozy. Next, I talked about this in my Winterween vlog, so I won't go too much into it here, but it was Delicious Monsters by Lizelle Sambury, which I rated 3.5 stars. This is a horror told in dual timeline. Really, we're given a lot more time in one than the other, but this is about true crime, missing Black girls, and also there are some spooky supernatural elements to it. Ultimately, the rating reflects more my perception of horror than the book being bad. I really liked the ending. I thought the ending was very good and satisfying. The tone of horror is just not for me, which you will also see with The Buffalo Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones, which I can recognize is very well done. It's very well done horror, but I've discovered horror is just not really my genre, so I also rated that one 3.5 stars. I think I already said that, so sorry if I did. If you want to see my more in-depth thoughts as I go through a week of reading these, you can check out my Winterween TBR-a-thon vlog, my Winterween and TBR-a-thon vlog. Oh, another one that I did a long review for was The Dragonborn Chair by Tad Williams, and far too long, just far too long. There was like one section that I liked, but the rest of it I was bored by following Simon. There were characters that were introduced, and then I wish they would have been the main character and they just weren't spent enough time on. But all in all, entirely too many characters, not enough women, weird pacing, and I gave it, what did I give it? 3 stars. Yeah, that feels about right. Next was City of Stolen Magic by Nazneen Ahmed Pathak. I read this for the r/fantasy book bingo. This is like the second to last book that I needed, so I read it for the Stranger in a Strange Land square. This is a historical fantasy book where this is our world, magic exists. This is in the, I think, 1850s or so. The main character is from India. She has magic and so does her mother, and one day British men come and take her mother away to England. So Champa, the main character, and an old friend of her mother's follow her to England, and along the way she meets some boys who are also from India. They're also both immigrants. I know that one of them is not from India, but I don't remember where he's from. And so we're following them as they settle into London, and Champa as she like takes on basically the British East India Company. They're not called that, but that's what, you know, it is in the book. Trying to exploit the magic of its colonies and its empire, and trying to get her mother back, and making some bad deals along the way. I rated this one 3.25 stars, and I don't think there was anything like wrong with it. It just didn't quite click for me, and I think that the book was like padded a little bit because there were sections that were from the boys' point of view, and those were good, but it felt like it took away from Champa's story a little bit, and I just kind of wondered like why we weren't following her. So I think that there's a different book that exists here that is a little bit tighter and follows Champa more. Then I read The Last Phi Hunter by Selene Goldenberg, which I rated 3.5 stars. This is another book that, like, I don't see anything wrong with it necessarily, but for some reason it just, like, wasn't sparking the spark, you know? I think the main thing with this one was pacing, where, like, events happened way sooner than I expected them to. Like, the main character, this is a, like, The Witcher but Thai. And the main character is a sort of witcher. He's a Phi hunter, and Phi are monsters in this world. And he has special abilities that he uses, and a way of like seeing into another plane. And he's asked to escort this pregnant woman, and she gives birth like immediately. And you're like, okay, what happens next? And then there's this big task that he's trying to do, and he accomplishes it at like the 50% mark. You're like, okay, well, what's the rest of the book? But I thought that the details were very good. There's kind of an unexpected character in here that like has some POV sections, and I really liked their bits and kind of the theme of their story. And something that this book starts to talk about, that, and it has a sequel that we'll get more into it, is kind of the ethics of killing these Phi, because they do bad things, and like the main character only hunts ones that have like attacked and eaten people, but also we find out that they are bad people who have been like reincarnated as Phi, and they're supposed to be able to redeem themselves. And so it's getting into kind of philosophically, like, do these people deserve redemption? How do you achieve redemption? So I will be reading the sequel, especially because I think the main character of that one is a bisexual woman, which is very cool. But I'm curious to see them getting into the Phi more and to spend more time in this world. I just hope that the pacing is a little bit different in the second book. I then read Daughter of the Empire by Janie Wirtz and Raymond E. Feist. I talk about this more in my, I forgot to mention that I talk about the Dragonborn Chair and this book in my 20th Century Fantasy vlog. So feel free to go check that out for my much more in-depth thoughts. But even though the main character was not a good person, I enjoyed this because she undergoes a lot of political machinations and has all of these plots and schemes that she executes, and that is just very satisfying to me. But it is a very unkind world, and she has to be unkind to get ahead in it. But I did rate that one 3.75 stars. Then a book that I don't have a lot to say about because I read it in a day was There's Something About Mira by Sonali Dev. This is about Mira, who has to go on a trip with her fiance by herself, where her fiance was supposed to go. They rescheduled several times. He's a surgeon and things keep coming up, so she ends up going to New York alone. But while there, she finds this ring and starts going on this quest across New York to return it to its owner, and along the way meets a journalist of Indian descent who was adopted and raised by a white couple, and he is helping her try and return the ring to its owner. Is romance, but is more of women's fiction. It's about like her growing and changing and like self-actualizing. And so the romance feels like the relationship between the characters is important, but the romance does not come in until later. But ultimately this was just a fine time, and I rated it 3.25 stars. Oh boy. Next was Deadly Ever After by Brittany Johnson. Like To the Moon and Back, I don't want to really drag this book, but this book is really bad. I am quite frankly astonished that it was traditionally published because it's so poorly written and things just kind of happen randomly, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So our main character is a princess who is killed on her wedding night and wakes up in this land where she's been given a second chance at life, but she has to team up with this other princess who also died, and together they have to try and go through this land with random trials and ultimately fall in love in 5 days. It was just poorly written, poorly edited. People say this all the time, but it's true. I've read better fan fiction. It had a really bad case of white room syndrome, where the surroundings were not described well. There's a point where one of the characters is being chased by a monster in the woods, and you're like, okay, so she's in the woods and there's trees, and then she's like, suddenly it tripped and fell into a lake. And I was like, what lake? What are you talking about? If there's a lake, you should have said there was a lake nearby. Lakes are pretty big. Because they're in kind of an afterlife or a pseudo afterlife that is testing them, things just kind of happen, and happen just very literally, where it's like, I need to learn this lesson. Here's a thing in the world that is forcing me to learn this lesson. Oh, here's a trial that will test me out the very thing that I was just complaining or arguing about. So you never know what's going to happen next, because literally the author can just do anything and you're like, yeah, sure, whatever. The ending was infuriating to me, and I can't spoil why, but there's a certain character that one of the main characters apparently cares a lot about, and is injured, and they think that they are dead, and then find out that they're not, and then we never follow up. So I guess he didn't care about them all that much. Okay, I'm getting really riled up. I was very disappointed by this book. I paid money for this book. I bought it from a romance novel bookstore. Probably shouldn't read this, and I'm so sorry, but it needed like another year of work put into it. It was not publication ready. And I'm really sorry to this debut author, but this book was just very disappointing and not good. Next, I read Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cañas. I've been hearing a lot about this author on BookTube. People really liked The Possession of Alba Diaz, and it was my understanding that this author writes historical horror, but that is, I think, inaccurate. This author writes romance, and then that happen to be set in the past, and then sometimes some horror elements come into it. But this book, Vampires of El Norte, was mainly about a relationship and a romance, and then everything else took a back seat. Like there's a whole production about going off to war in the Mexican-American War, and the battle lasts a chapter, and then they leave the war and they don't come back to it. And the horror element was just it was there, and like it was an important part of the story. There is so much more romance and talk of feelings than I expected in this book, and so that was kind of a jarring reading experience. And I also just kind of didn't really feel anything about the romance. So there are these two characters. They're 13. She's the daughter of the ranch owner. He's a little cowboy, a little vaquero, and they're best friends. But one night they're like kind of playing out in the woods, and she gets attacked by a vampire, and he scoops her up and he rushes her back to the ranch house, but she's going cold in his arms. And when he brings her in, her mom is like, oh my gosh, she's dead, my daughter is dead. And he just kind of freaks out. He's like, my best friend is dead, I'm gonna get blamed for it. And he runs. And we pick up when 9 years have gone by. He's now 22. He's had a whole life of being a vaquero, and he's really good at it. He's saving up money. He's sleeping with a widow, and the whole time he's just so angsty about his best friend who died. But meanwhile, back at the ranch, she didn't die. She was fine. She has a scar on her neck, but she's not a vampire and she's not dead. And in her perspective, her best friend just up and left one day. So she's furious at him. And we get so much back and forth about, she's like, don't talk to me, you left me. And he's like, I thought you were dead. And she's like, I don't want to hear it. So that went back and forth several times. And I think that I would have just had different expectations if I'd known going in that it's like romance, historical, horror. Can't even see that horror down here, but the romance is really what this book is about. It's what's driving the plot. The relationship is the plot. I just would have, I think, rated it differently if I'd known that going in, but I gave it 3.5 stars. Last two books will be fairly quick because they're both featured in other videos. One, in fact, got an entire review video that just went up, and that is to review A Rising Storm by Monaco Black Goose. This is the second book in the Napashi Wasit series. It's the sequel to Shape a Dragon's Breath, and I loved it. I gave it 4.5 stars. I thought that it really expanded and built on the world of the first book very well, and I just love the main character of Anakus and how strong she is, how self-assured, and how she builds relationships with other people. I love seeing relationships develop, both friendships and her romantic relationships with her partners Theod and Liberty, and also her relationship with her dragon Kasaqua. We get introduced to some great new characters in this book. My only critique was there were some plot threads that didn't get followed up with. I felt like we had like too many plot threads, and then the climax was quite quick, and I would have liked to see it go on for longer. But other than that, it was great. Like I said, I rated it 4.5 stars. It was one of my favorite books of the month. Another one of my favorite books of the month is going to be in my upcoming ARC review video that I mentioned, and that is What We Are Seeking by Cameron Reed. I don't want to go into it too much, but I did rate it 4 stars, and it is a worthy successor to The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. It really feels like it is from that era, while having more modern day politics and talking really beautifully about transness and gender identity. That's gonna wrap it up for me. I tried to keep it a lot shorter than the hour-long behemoth from my December wrap-up. Thank you very much for watching. If you got this far, please like and subscribe, and I will be back probably next week with another video. I might take next week off. I'm working on my ARC review video, and I have one more book to read, so it just kind of depends on if I get that video ready in time. But I am trying to give myself more weeks off because one video a week is a pretty hard schedule to keep up with. But again, thanks for watching, and I will see you when I post next.